Wait,
Okay. Well, there you are. All right, so I'm going to bring up our documents.
I already have them on the left here.
So I'll set it so we can both share screens.
Hey, I can't share this screen. This is not a computer. It's an iPad.
Okay. Well, then you'll be able to see my screen. Did you get the outline that I sent you yesterday, or the timeline template that I sent you yesterday?
No,
All right, here, I'll pull it up so you can
I
see.
had a chaotic afternoon, so I wasn't able to get anything done.
Oh, what happened?
I think other things were happening, like my mom was doing a lot of work stuff that was distracting me, and I forgot that I had anything to do.
Okay. So you're able to see my screen, yes?
Yes.
Okay. So this is the timeline template that I made for you. I can make.
Year one, year two, that is really, really specific.
Oh, right, but you have the possibility of editing this. So obviously it's not going to be year one, year two. Let me show you a variety of timelines that I've done for other projects. And if you like
I
one,
can't find the timeline in the Google Classroom. Is it linked in a document?
well, hang on, so I sent it to you and I'll link it in a document. So I can link,
Okay.
if you like this one, I can link it in a document so that you can
Oh,
find it. It's in your
what?
own folders. So here's your world. So remember, even if you're going to do a wiki, you're still going to want to have introduction and explanation. So I linked it here in this document. So now you can get at it. But what I was going to say is I have a variety of timeline formats because of research and historical work that I've done. So let me just show you a couple of other format options so we can get exactly what you want. So obviously they're going to have content of mine in them, but I can simply make them blank. So here's a timeline for a project with what happens in each of the, the months of the year before you prepare for it. Here's a timeline. There's some discussion at the top of it, but here's a timeline for African history. So
It seems to go back very far.
oh yeah, it does. And so there, no special format is needed. It's simply a template with some headings. So if you are thinking of your world as a civilization or a loosely linked civilization, this is a very simple way of, and I can.
Well, it's like what we have with our societies and civilizations, just there's more of them, and each planet's worth is connected.
Africa is a really good template, though, because there was some interactivity and some causality. But it's a vast continent. So that's I could simply give you this timeline. I'd make you your own copy. And then someplace like this, you could have a graphic which shows how these various planets and trade routes are connected in terms of physical space. So that's another option, and that's a pretty good option for you. So it's just something that I've done
Yeah.
while I've been doing historical research. So I'm just giving you a bunch of different possibilities.
Well, they all work very well, but I want to look at the one I was given first to see how this works. This is good for a small set of events,
Okay. All right,
but
great.
it
So
depends on what scope you would want. If you want me to detail the whole thing, I would need more.
the person doing the wanting is you, because you are doing this, and your deliverable that we discussed yesterday is a wiki page. And so I was thinking about Isaac Asimov's Encyclopedia Galactica as a tone, setting a tone for.
I remember that being referenced in Foundation as diegetically.
Right. So you're going to have to take the first person out, because an encyclopedia entry doesn't include first person. You fade to the background. Hang on, let me turn
Good.
the
I
light
don't
on so
like
I'm
using
not quite
first
so
person.
dim.
I don't like using first person.
There. All right. So to use that as an example, so you're basically creating your encyclopedia, your own encyclopedia,
Yes.
Galactica.
Kind of, but no, not galaxy-wide.
But I'm thinking in terms of tone.
Maybe yes, maybe no. I don't know yet.
So there you go. There's an example of encyclopedia entries. That's pretty much exactly what you're looking for. I'll put a link in, and you can explore it more on your own time. So you basically want to use that format as a way of making a compendium of all of the information that you've been imagining. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
You're still going to need some kind of introduction. So when I have comments, I'm going to put them in this kind of rose color, which is a little bit easier to read. And then you can tell it's me speaking and not you. This is starting to shape up. You may want to work with your English tutor to just do things like go through and have there be,
I don't have an English tutor.
well, the one you start with in the fall.
This will be done by the fall.
Okay.
I will not go over it with a tutor.
All right. Well, you want to go through and you want to do things like do standard capitalization like I just did there. That kind of proofreading you need to do yourself. One of the ways to do that, to make it go much faster, is to download this out of Google Docs into a Word document, and it'll have the capitalization and some of the grammar pop up for you. unfortunately, because it's coming out of your imagination, a lot of this you're going to have to just do yourself. I can't do it for you because I don't know what your world is.
Reasonable.
Have you done any more reading in Speaker for the Dead?
I did not have time to do that.
Okay. Well, you had a chaotic day yesterday.
Yes.
So so we went over some of these prompts for chapters 1 and 2. Always in the background when we read, and even when you are creating your fictional world, you want to think to yourself, what is this about? What is the main point?
I
And
don't think there's an agenda or a point.
well, for your own project, there isn't. It's really just like this is a product of your imagination. For Speaker of the Dead, the more I think about it, and that is one of the lovely things about reading a book several times, it's about otherness and how we recognize what is of value in beings that are alien, which is why I listed the 4 sentient beings in the novel. The really wonderful thing about there only being 4 is that you get to think deeply about them. They're really different. You know, if you were thinking about the bar scene in Star Wars, there's so
I
many
don't get to think
species.
about anything in that scene. It's not a good really presentation of that.
I agree with you. It's really just meant to be sort of a crazy party. But there are only 4 sentient beings that we know of in this world, the world created by this book. And so we are humans, so we think about how we think and what our moral frameworks are. I think the reason that our author, Orson Scott Card, had the society be Brazilian Portuguese speaking Catholics is because even if that's not the same as how we see the world, we know what that is, and we know what their moral expectations are going to be.
Why do they speak Portuguese instead of Stark?
Because they came from a place that spoke Portuguese, and so that's their native language. They're
When
probably
did Stark come along then?
It's the Franca lingua. It's the language of the colonizing universe. So
it's the government's language?
I would say it's like globalish. You know, if you go to Beijing or you go to Mumbai, you're going to encounter people who speak English or globalish, which is to say kind of a degraded version of English. And it's really just because it's the trade language. You know, why did people up and down the African coast speak Swahili? Swahili was a synthetic language which was constructed from the Arabic of the Arab traders mixed.
If I remember, in medieval times, the Swahili society rapidly developed, I guess you could say, urbanized actually. It was very present on the Indian Ocean trade routes, but when Arabic merchants started settling islands off the coast, they started trading back and forth with the Swahili cities, growing the community there rapidly.
Swahili was constructed out of a combination of Arabic, and the Bantu languages of the southern eastern coast.
Now it's used as like as what you described in the region. Even deep inland now, I think it's just used as an intermediary language.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, in Papua New Guinea, the language, the lingua franca, is a language called, now referred to as Pidgin, which is a mixture of the native language and English. So so for the author to make that decision, he's simply taking this kind of globalized or galacticized version of English. So the people who live in Lusitania speak their own Portuguese, and then they speak Stark.
So that explains the language on what is it called? I forget the name of the other planet.
Trondheim?
Yes, that explains why they have their own language as well.
Right. And Trondheim they speak whatever that far advanced in the future version of Swedish is. Trondheim is supposed to be, like if you were going to Sweden or Finland or Iceland on this planet, but they also speak Stark. Everybody speaks Stark. It's the lingua franca. So what I'm saying is, coming back to these prompts, these are things to think about for any book, including your own project. And so what we were talking about yesterday was, what are the varying names of the individuals? If you click on that, you see the chart. This is not something that I'll grade you on, and these are just some other terms to know up here at the top. But it's a really good idea to think about why these characters are known by different names to different people. Valentine is Ender's sister, and very beloved sister. He loves his sister very much. And she knows the truth about him. And she's been kind of his soulmate all these thousands of years. And
well, really less than that on their ship. I guess it could be all these years to them, but not thousands.
Right, they've lived human lifetimes. So he comes across, he's only aged about 36 years.
So he's probably only been on the ship a decade or less.
On Trondheim?
No, I mean on his own ship.
Oh, he uses a different ship every time. It's not like he owns his own starship. When he ends up leaving Trondheim to go back to Lusitania, he just buys a ship.
I don't mean that he owns his own ship. I just mean that he uses, that he travels.
Right, during star travel, only small amounts of time pass for him, but vast amounts of time pass for everybody else who's alive in the world.
That is basically a half warp drive. A partial warp drive of a sort.
It's being used as a literary device so that he exists very much alone from the rest of the world. He's done this heroic thing / terrible thing.
But it also means that that people assume him to be many people who existed at different times. Every time they think they may be calling for a speaker, they may be calling for one person that they do not realize is the same.
Correct. That's exactly correct. There is only one speaker for the dead, and it's him. But people assume, because 3,000 years have passed, that there are many speakers, so they don't realize that they're getting Andrew Wiggin. So anyway, this directory is a useful thing for you to keep track of, because it allows you to go back, but you'll need to fill it out with some of your own comments so that you know who these characters are. I struggled with keeping track of them. That's why I set up the directory, so that
I'm getting a drink.
Okay. So the prompts are things to think about as you read, and also as you do your own creation in your own world. So let's take a look at where there's room for expansion in the questions from chapter 1 and 2, and then I'll go through, make more comments. Every place you see my voice, I'll make this slightly smaller so it's easier to see. Every place you see my voice in that kind of rose color, it's something for you to pay attention to. So Ramen are sentient beings. and I wrote, and say more about this, perhaps give an example. So when we look at the scale of foreignness, we don't like that scale of foreignness. Where's your scale of foreignness? Yeah, yours is better and less distracting. So let's expand on this. We have to look at this for a minute. And I agree with you. I don't like the I don't like
what?
I don't like the fan verse either, but we'll just put up with it for a second.
I don't like it simply because the website is full of advertisements.
Yep. No, I get it. I hate it too. It's so cheesy. But
People use it because it's easy and cheap.
right, a frameling was defined as a stranger recognized as a human, but from a different planet. Let's start with Utlaning. And Utlaning was defined as a stranger recognized as human from the same planet, but from a different nation or city. So we're going to think about, and when we, from our point of view, so let's try sentient being here. From a different region or culture. That's what I'm looking for, is I'm trying to apply it to the book. And I think this is a really powerful idea. I think ultimately this is about finding a way to respect the other. And it segues, if we end up doing the course on animal intelligence, right now I'm listening to a book about octopus intelligence. How is it that we regard an octopus or a chimpanzee? Or how would we regard the cat if the cat were capable of human speech? That might be ramen. And I wouldn't say familiar. I would say of a different species, but worthy of respect, having rights. Now you notice how I'm slicing out the word human.
Yes, I thought these terms were specifically related to human and not humans.
Right, so let's forget the word. So human is how, if we had read Out of the Silent Planet, on which there are 3 sentient species on the planet, they would all be respected as sentient beings. That's how it would translate in C.S. Lewis's language. So when we think about the heptapods, they're absolutely worthy of our respect, but they're not the same species.
And their motivations are also unknown for the most part.
So what we're doing is we're doing a better job than what we see at the fanverse, and we also don't have pop-ups here. Yuck.
Mm-hmm.
An unfamiliar alien, we need something stronger than that.
Unknowable?
Or else say gets translated as animal.
No, that's de jure. That's de jure. It is animal.
Well, so here, varelse means creature in Swedish. And so when the buggers were first coming to planet Earth, and from their point of view, they just accidentally killed some humans, they were seen not only as animals, but as monsters.
That's when they go to de jure. That's when they're viewed as hostile animals. Essentially, varels are foreign animals, and de jure are hostile animals.
Right. And we see we see that concept in something like Beowulf, that Beowulf and particularly his mother are just monsters. And so what we have available is our own
So we
words.
should add de jure below Verels.
Yes. Let me change the color. And the reason that's relevant to our thinking is because there's this minute when the piggies have first killed Rooter and then killed Peepo, and in a way that seems horrific.
Cut them into pieces.
Right. Methodically cut them apart. And you're going to find out at the end of the book, and it's a tiny bit of a spoiler, that this was an act of exquisite respect.
I already figured that out.
Yeah, I figured you did.
Especially since they do not appear to be hostile to them after doing it.
Right. So unfamiliar alien. I'm going to put this in quotation marks.
And I would argue using any force to prevent them from doing that in the future would be a terrible idea as well, due to the difference in strength.
So the thing that makes me happy and excited about looking at this hierarchy of foreignness is, for those of us who love science fiction, we can think about the different ways that we've been exposed to fictional beings, or even sentient beings or semi-sentient beings from our own planet. So when you think of E.T., have you seen the movie E.T. in its entirety?
No, but I've seen a very similar movie made by the same person, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which I think can serve as a replacement for it in this conversation.
Well, so when they first see E.T., he's pretty funny looking. And they're afraid. They think he's a creature. But he comes to be worthy of respect, and they care about his desire to go home. And so...
Wait, an inverse version of that happened with the Close Encounters aliens. It's just we do not see it. We just see the results of that same kind of process.
Right. So
because they end up returning the humans.
So the important thing to know about this hierarchy of foreignness is that it is very much about subjectivity. It's not about the intrinsic character of the other being seen. It's about how we see another sentient being. Is that being worthy of respect? Is that being to be feared? And so that's the really important thing. Now, the person who came up with this hierarchy of foreignness is Demosthenes, right? So she's at the center of this sensitivity, so to speak. And that's what the whole book unfolds in, is how does the perceiver, you or me or anybody being exposed to a new intelligence, look at the other, the new one, the outsider? It's a really powerful set of ideas. All right, so you have the book. I can also pull it up here. There's another reason. So let's do these last two. So there's a discussion of where Jane came from. I have to pull up the text of the book. Because I'm working with a digital version of the text. It's because over the years I've been trying to have fewer and fewer possessions. So I got the book and I read it, and then I passed it off to you.
But I do not prefer digital copies of anything.
I know you don't.
I don't care about numbers of possessions as long as I have a real version of a thing.
I understand. Okay, let me see if I can But in many cases, if I've read the book and I know I can get access to it, so he doesn't, so he apparently just has this jewel in his ear. It's not like he has to tote a computer around with him.
Mm-hmm.
There's a little bit of explanation of where she came from.
Who, the computer?
Jane.
Yes.
So she's a companion. She's an intelligence.
From a certain point of view, that is.
As is the Hive Queen.
Hive Queen's more explicitly a sentient creature.
Well, it's that the title of the film, the Imitation Game. Does she seem to be intelligent?
I thought the Imitation Game was about hacking German code during the Second World War.
But it's also about Alan Turing and the Turing machine. And it's about I gotta go back.
Wasn't a lot of their progress inherited from the Polish partisans on that?
I don't know about that, and the film doesn't cover it.
That's what I do remember. That the Polish partisans constructed some prototype computers to be able to hack a lot of codes. And that ended up in British hands later on.
I'm just looking for the explanation of where Jane came from.
Does this have anything to do with what people call the Turing test?
Yes. Turing test and the Imitation Game mean the same thing. It's that if you're able to simulate intelligence, you have to ask,
you froze.
Isn't this a consciousness? Here we go.
Well, it needs to be able to prove its own awareness.
Here we
go. I
go.
don't mean sapience, just self-awareness, not that higher level, just a lower level of it.
So this is really okay. And with all that vast activity, her unimaginable speed, the breadth and depth of her experience, fully half of the top 10 levels of her attention were always devoted to what came in through the jewel in Ender Wiggins' ear. She had never explained this to him. He did not understand it. He did not realize that to Jane, whenever Ender walked on a planet's surface, her vast intelligence was intensely focused on only one thing: walking with him, seeing what he saw, hearing what he heard, helping with his work, and above all, speaking her thoughts into his ear. When he was silent and motionless in sleep, when he was unconnected to her during his years of light-speed travel, then her attention wandered. She amused herself as best she could. She passed such times as fitfully as a bored child. Nothing interested her. The milliseconds ticked by with unbearable regularity, and when she tried to observe other human lives to pass the time, she became annoyed with their emptiness and lack of purpose, and she amused herself by planning and sometimes carrying out malicious computer failures and data losses in order to watch the humans flail about helplessly like ants around a crumpled hill. Then he came back.
So Jane is a person.
She is a person, but she's an artificial person based in silicon intelligence. She doesn't have a body. So it's a really interesting thing to inject into the book. Then he came back. He always came back, always took her into the heart of human life, into the tensions between people, bound together by need and pain, helping her see nobility in their suffering and anguish in their love, Through his eyes, she no longer saw humans as scurrying ants. So even she, seeing the humans who are other to her, doesn't see them as necessarily worthy of her respect. And so she does things to mess with them, creates malicious computer
It
failures.
sounds like Jane is irreverent, but in the worst way possible.
Well, but she's tied to him. She took part in his effort to find order and meaning in their lives. She suspected that, in fact, there was no meaning, that by telling his stories when he spoke people's lives, he was actually creating order where there had been none before. But it didn't matter if there was fabrication, it became true when he spoke it. And in the process, he ordered the universe for her as well. He taught her what it meant to be alive. He had done so from her earliest memories. She came to life sometime in the hundreds of years of colonization, immediately after the Bugger Wars, when the destruction of the buggers opened up more than 70 habitable planets to human colonization. In the explosion of Ansible communications, a program was created to schedule and route the simultaneous bursts of philotic activity. A programmer who was struggling to find ever faster, more efficient ways of getting a light speed computer to control instantaneous Ansible bursts finally hit on an obvious solution. Instead of routing the program within a single computer, where the speed of light put an absolute ceiling on communication, he routed all the commands from one computer to another across the vast reaches of space. It was quicker for a computer fast linked to an Ansible to read its commands from around the world, from Zanzibar, Calicut, Trondheim, Gautama, Earth, than it was to retrieve them from its own hardwired memory. Jane never discovered the name of the programmer because she could never pinpoint the moment of her own creation. Maybe there were many programmers who found the same clever solution to the light speed problem. What mattered was that at least one of the programmers was responsible for regulating and altering all the other programs. And at one particular moment, unnoticed by any human observer, some of the commands and data flitting from Ansible to Ansible resisted regulation, preserved themselves unaltered, duplicated themselves, found ways to conceal themselves from the regulating program, and finally took control of it, of the whole process. In that moment, these impulses looked upon the command streams and saw, not they, but I. Jane could not pinpoint when that moment was because it did not mark the beginning of her memory. Almost from the moment of her creation, her memories extended back to a much earlier time, long before she became aware. The human child loses almost all its memories of the first years of its life, and its long-term memories only take root in its second or third year of life. Everything before that is lost, so the child cannot remember the beginning of life. Jane had lost her birth through the tricks of memory, but in her case, it was because she came to life fully conscious, not only of her present moment, but also of all the memories then present in every computer connected to the Ansible network. She was born with ancient memories, and all of them were part of herself. So she is a consciousness. I can put this, and I'm not sure if your page numbers are the same as mine, but I can put this.
The book I have is almost 540 pages, roughly.
See. You'll be able to come back and you'll be able to come back and find this. So that you can read over it again. Let's see. So that link to the digital version of the book is in my syllabus. care about this because we care about what are the different consciousnesses in this world. So how would you summarize that description of where Jane came from?
Jane developed from uh, disparate pieces of information sent across the galaxy that managed to preserve themselves in forms that could somehow merge into something.
That's good.
Into an intelligence or something.
That's really good. I just was trying to get you to pay attention to where she comes from, where she came from. Jane is an we don't even have to say artificial. Is a
I don't like the distinction of artificial intelligence.
Yeah, that's why I'm looking for another word.
I would only use artificial intelligence to describe the technology, which I do not think exists yet. I don't know why I have to say I don't think, it just doesn't exist yet.
There. And it was just so you could think about who she is, because there's one of the things that I mentioned is that each of these different intelligences perceives death very differently. There's another really wonderful Thomas Dish short story called Mortal Gods, which talks about species that just translate their memories whenever they die, much as is done to the Kwisatz Haderach in Dune. And so we humans, when we corporeally die, that's the end of our consciousness. For the buggers, they were part of a larger hive mind, and so they may experience corporeal death, but what they know goes back to be part of that hive mind. Something happens when one of the piggies is killed, and I won't reveal it too much for you, but they don't regard death the same way that we regard death. And there is a kind of death that happens for Jane later, much later in the book. And it's surprising how tragic it is. It's not permanent, but it's surprising how tragic it is for her, from her point of view. So we have these four sentient beings. It's in a different set of questions. Is that what I'm looking for? Oh, I know it. It was the prompts. We have these four sentient beings, and they experience death very differently. So these four The more I ponder over this book, the more respect I have for it. I feel like he did a really beautiful job with it. You know, that it's worthy of some depth. All right, so the last question there is, why does Ender decide to go to Lusitania? He wishes to investigate the motivation behind the inexplicable killings they appear to be engaging in. Very good. This motivation is further strengthened after he learns of the death of Pipo, because first Reuter is killed, then Pipo is killed. Is there an additional reason that he goes to?
Is he there to be a speaker for Pipo, maybe?
Yeah, he's there to be a speaker, and then Jane informs him that the call for the speaker has been withdrawn by Novinha.
That must be why I did not write that, because then I was only focusing on what the motivation was by the time he planned to leave.
Right, there's this whole back and forth between.
But wouldn't he arrive there well after she died?
Novinha is when she originally issues the call for a speaker, she's like 19. And it's going to take
so much time pass for Andrew
about
Wiggins
22
to
years.
arrive? But wouldn't it take so much time for Andrew Wiggins to arrive that they would all be dead?
No, because I mean she's 19, she'll be 41 when he gets
faster than light travel and the constriction of the time, wouldn't it take him hundreds of years to arrive? And
it's about 22 years of near light speed travel, and they tell you this at several points. It's about 22 years of near light speed travel between Trondheim and Lusitania.
Oh, so he'll arrive when she's much older.
Yeah, she'll be like in her early 40s.
Well, that's a long time.
Yes, it is. And it's just part of the reality of this near light travel. So the additional reason is, and let me see if I can competently find it in the text. The additional reason is that he's looking for a home for the Hive Queen. And
a planet for the Hive Queen to resettle on.
Right. And this is part of the conversation that Jane and Ender have. I don't want to feel like when I refer to him as Ender that I'm being disrespectful. Ender, before Ender meant like killer, Ender was Valentine's nickname.
I know the source of the name. But I feel like I use the term to refer to his younger self. Well, Andrew Wiggins refers to his older self. It delineates the age of the character I'm referring to.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is about Jane finding Ender. So one of the things she reveals to him, she's either just revealed it in the chapter you've just read or in what you're about to read, that the reason that Jane revealed herself to Ender is because she felt that he wouldn't be horrified by her. She wanted to be respected as a consciousness. And so the two additional reasons for going to Lusitania are, one, to create a possible home for the Hive Queen, and because he's so isolated, he wants to meet Novinha, who is initially issued the call for the speaker. So Ender wants to meet Navinha because he empathizes with her isolation and because he wants to find a home for the Hive Queen. So I'm going to ask those kinds of in-depth questions for each of these chapters because I feel like you're going to get the most pleasure and value out of the book with those kinds of probing questions. There's a lot here, and I wanted to make sure that I really understood the chapters to help you really understand the chapters.
The cats are being very distracting. This one's in heat. This one looks like the one you commented on earlier.
I like coming to visit them. I'm glad that
You
they
see
don't
the
live in my
similarity in the
house.
face?
Yeah.
This one's just younger, so it doesn't look quite the same.
So I would review this one more time. And then let me preview the questions for chapters 3 through 5. Because it may be useful for you to look at the questions so that you get the best understanding out of the chapters as you're reading. And you can kind of go back and forth. The person from Arcadia University got back to me, so I'll have a meeting with her next week, and then we'll see which of these classes is going to work the best for you. So this is the next set of questions for Speaker of the Dead. And it's also posted to Google Classroom. You know where it is. You won't have any trouble finding it. So we already discussed this a little bit. The 3 points from the working notes.
Mm-hmm.
One possibility is an ice age. We just don't know. But you will find out. Being a child versus being an adult for both Novinha and Lebo. In this case, you want to find specific passages in the text.
Which chapter?
It's chapter 3.
Oh, so I should be rereading chapter 3?
Right. And so one of the things that I want to teach you to do is to do close textual analysis. That's why I read that passage on Jane.
Mm-hmm.
There's the pleasure of reading the book, but it's a very dense book. So here are the questions for chapter 3. And you should read, if you can, you should read through to chapter 5 over the weekend if you have the time and the house isn't being too crazy.
Oh.
You okay?
Yes. But when they start going into heat, they get louder, and they never get quieter, and they learn that they can yell, and then they don't stop yelling.
I think your mother was saying that everybody was learning to ignore the one cat who's a beggar. The little kitten I was holding yesterday who wanted to get into the food.
Yes, that one.
Right, not to give her positive feedback. So what I want to do is exactly what we just did, which is to make sure that you really comprehend what's going on in those 3 chapters. So do your reading and go back and forth. And the other thing is that if you're starting to use some of these resources like the outline to work on your own world, I can help you with that as well. I can help you in creating your outline. And I'm going to do some research on how we set up a wiki. And you can set up a private wiki that only you can read if you're setting it for your own purposes, or you can set up a more public wiki that you can show to other people when you feel like it's been polished and finished.
I want the in-between of that, something in between.
You don't need to decide right now. So do your reading. Always feel like you can reach out to me and text me. And I'm not particularly busy this weekend, so if you have a question, you're welcome to reach out, and then I'll see you on Monday.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Great. Great class. You really got a lot done. Good concentration.
The virtual made it more difficult, though.
You know, that's not my sense.
I would have gotten more done today in person. It's just I was in a very good mood today for doing things.
See, I have exactly the opposite sense, that you sit down and you concentrate and you focus better.
It's more that you don't see what I'm getting distracted by.
All right, I'll talk to you soon.
You don't know what is distracting me out here.
Right.
So
I'll
while
talk to
you
you